Okay, going to scroll down a little bit more. And then we have hook block view. So this is what happens when the block is actually going to be generated. Just ignore some of this odd highlighting. See how this is crossed out and these are highlighted. This is because we're opening this trails.module file inside of our Drupal 8 project. So this is actually giving us a little bit of insight into some things that have changed. For example, user access is deprecated. You can see in the yellow hover that it says function user access is deprecated. And variable get here, if we hover over it, it says undefined function variable get. So this is just a little preview of what we're about to run into. If you're used to using variable get and variable set, we're going to change that around a bit in Drupal 8. So we're going to check to see if the user has access to view the block. Then we're going to initialize a couple of variables here. The delta is the unique identifier for the block. So if we scroll up to hook block info here, this is the delta right here. It's kind of an odd name for it. It's just a unique identifier. So then we're going to switch based on that delta. In the case of history, which is the only block that we have, we're going to grab the trails history, which is what we were generating in our hook init function. We're going to reverse the trail because we want the newest visits to show up at the top. We're going to grab the number of items that we can display by using variable get and grabbing the trails block num. This is what we set in the blocks configuration form. And then we're going to loop through each item and generate some output as a list, which will include the title to the page, the path to the page, and the timestamp, formatted nicely using format interval, which looks like it's also deprecated. Then finally, we'll wrap some HTML around the whole thing. And then if we scroll down here, we're setting a subject for the block and the content, the subject being the title. And then we return it. So working with blocks in Drupal 7 meant that if you had multiple blocks, the logic for each block would be split up between these different hooks. So for example, if we wanted to add a new block to this module, we would have to initialize it here inside of our block info, and then we'd have to check for the delta here in block configure and set up a check to make sure that this code only ran for the history block and then other code ran for our new block. And we'd have to do the same thing for hook block save and hook block view. So that was fine. If you got used to it, you know how to work with it. But for a module that defines multiple blocks, it can be a little bit of a nightmare, not really that much fun to work with. In Drupal 8, this gets consolidated a lot, and you'll see that as we start to work through this process. Okay, I'm going to continue to scroll down. Let's see what else we have. So we have one more function here, trails cron. So what this does is it actually prunes the end of this trails array, because every page we visit, we're expanding our array. It's getting bigger and bigger. It makes sense to cut off some of the extra sometime. And so we're going to do that during a cron run. And so we grab the trails history, we figure out how much there are over the last 5 visits, cut out the last 5 visits, and then we set the trail history to whatever those last 5 visits were. And that's it. So the bulk of our code is really about our block, but we're also setting up permissions, we're setting up a cron run, and we're setting up a configuration page for our module. So these are all things that we'll need to do in order to fully upgrade our module.